Imagine believing Jason Voorhees was nothing more than a Hollywood monster. A mask, a machete, and a string of sequels designed to scare teenagers. But what if I told you his story wasn't born in a script, but buried in forgotten files, silenced witnesses, and a lake that still whispers at night? This isn't fiction. This is the terrifying true story behind Jason Voorhees. In July of 1979, 3 teenagers vanished near a remote campground in Oregon. Their tent was ripped apart, the ground soaked in blood, and on a broken shard of mirror, one word was written in a trembling fingertip. Jason. There were no bodies, no prints, no signs of escape. The case was sealed within days. Local newspapers were ordered to stay quiet, but the silence was too heavy, too deliberate, as if someone wanted the truth buried deeper than the lake itself. Sheriff Douglas Crane tried to push the investigation forward. He insisted something wasn't right. He gathered testimonies from campers who swore they heard screams by the water and saw a shadowy figure dragging something into the trees. But just days later, Crane was removed for misconduct. His files disappeared, his notes confiscated. To this day, no one knows what he wrote in those missing reports. That same summer, a stranger arrived in town. Alan Plow, a screenwriter who claimed to be researching for a new movie. He bought drinks for locals, asked unsettling questions, and paid cash for old diaries and police records. People thought he was just another Hollywood type looking for inspiration. But why would a filmmaker be so desperate to collect real evidence? Why did he care so much about the name Jason? One man, Jonas Carter, an old fisherman, broke the silence. He said on the night those teens vanished, he saw something crawl out of the lake. It was small at first, like a boy, but wrong somehow. The face was twisted, scarred, and the eyes, he swore they weren't alive. Days later, Carter was found dead on his porch, officially a heart attack, but neighbors heard screams and the sound of metal scraping before he collapsed. His body bore scratches no one could explain. Weeks later, Paramount announced a film, Friday the 13th. Its leaked script mirrored everything that happened at the lake. A deformed boy, a grieving mother, a string of killings around a camp. Suddenly, the real story was swallowed by fiction. The name Jason Voorhees became legend, safely tucked behind the glow of a movie screen. Audiences screamed, laughed, and went home. But the people in that Oregon town never laughed. They locked their doors tighter and stopped saying his name aloud. 2 years later, a private investigator named Martin Doyle received an anonymous package. Inside was a cassette. When he played it, the screen showed shaky footage of a masked figure standing in the trees, watching a cabin filled with teenagers. The breathing was heavy, the silence unbearable. Doyle couldn't let it go. He drove to the town near West Lake, the supposed inspiration for the story. What he found wasn't a sleepy camp town. It was a place frozen in fear. Shops shuttered early. People crossed the street when he asked about the lake. When he whispered the name Jason, some broke down crying. Others simply turned away, as though saying it too loud might summon him. Finally, a woman named Abigail invited him in. She'd lived there her whole life and carried scars she never spoke of. Over tea, she slid him an old diary. It belonged to Pamela Voorhees. The entries were chilling. Pamela wrote about years of abuse at a psychiatric facility, her obsession with her only son, and the child's deformities. She described how teens mocked him, how they cornered him by the water. And one night, they lit a match. Jason burned, survived, but was left twisted beyond recognition. Pamela swore she would protect him. She believed the same teenagers, disguised or reincarnated, returned year after year to harm him. So she killed. She called it justice. The diary ended with a single line scratched into the paper. He's ready now. A month later, Pamela disappeared from her institution. The only evidence left behind was a message on her cell mirror. He waits in the water. If you're still watching, you're probably feeling that tingle in your spine, that mix of disbelief and dread. And if you haven't already, this is the time to subscribe, because stories like this only get darker. Martin dug deeper. In an archive, he found a blurred photograph of a boy in a crude mask. Next to it, a file note read, In case of emergency, activate Jason. The words made no sense. Activate? This wasn't a boy. It was something bigger, something tied to whispers about government experiments during the Cold War. Subjects tested for pain resistance, fear conditioning, survival beyond normal limits. He tracked down Robert Lang, a former psychiatric nurse. Lang hesitated, then confessed. Pamela believed Jason wasn't just her son anymore. She claimed he had become something else, something that couldn't die. After her escape, Lang was ordered to join a secret mission, to find Jason, to erase him, permanently. Doyle thought it was madness. But the pieces aligned too perfectly. Reports of drownings with no bodies, campers vanishing in forests near lakes across the Pacific Northwest, torn tents, scratches in the trees, and always the same detail: a mask. One night, Doyle found himself standing before a cabin half submerged by moss and water. Inside, ashes, a leather mask, and a faded photograph of a smiling boy. On the back, written in trembling ink, was a message: "He will return. And when he does, the blood will be mine." Doyle left shaken, clutching the photo like proof of a nightmare. But proof doesn't always bring safety. That night, the power cut in his motel. A knock at the door. Another. Louder. He peered through the peephole. Nothing. When he opened it, a crude, wet mask lay on the floor. He didn't sleep. He drove to the city at dawn and handed everything to a journalist known for exposing government cover-ups. At first, she thought it was just an elaborate hoax, until she played the cassette, until she saw the eyes. And that was only the beginning. Because what came next would prove Jason Voorhees wasn't just a legend. He was something the world was never supposed to know. Lisa Harrow, the journalist Doyle trusted, couldn't let go of what she had seen. The tape haunted her: shaky hands, heavy breathing, and that mask staring back from the shadows. It wasn't just a character. It was real. She packed her notes and flew across the country to meet Dr. Alan Krebs, a folklore expert with ties to classified government files. Krebs examined the diary, the photos, the tape. His conclusion was unnerving. Jason wasn't born of myth or madness. He was a failed experiment from a Cold War project known only as Revenant Protocol. The files spoke of subjects broken by trauma, forced through rituals of pain, altered to survive the impossible. Only one survived. His name was redacted, but the location matched: West Lake. Krebs explained it bluntly. Jason didn't feel pain. He didn't tire. He didn't die. His body remembered the fire, the drowning, the betrayal. And now he hunted anyone who disturbed the place where it all began. Lisa wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, but the look in Krebs's eyes told her he wasn't speculating. He was warning. Still, Lisa wasn't afraid of shadows. She returned to Oregon with her cameraman and camped by the lake. For 2 nights, nothing happened. On the third, the camera caught movement: a massive shape, broad shoulders, a crude mask dripping lake water. It stood between the trees, watching. The sound was silence, deeper than anything natural. They fled in panic, but the footage survived. When Lisa tried to release her documentary, it was taken down within hours. Her accounts suspended. Calls stopped going through. She knew it wasn't random. Someone powerful wanted Jason's truth locked away. The next day, Doyle vanished. No calls, no messages, his motel room stripped bare. It was as if he'd been erased. Lisa left the country, terrified for her life. But whispers grew online. Deep web users traded fragments of tapes. Survivors told of torn tents, clawed trees, and that same silent figure. And in each account, no bodies were ever found. Authorities called them drownings, bear attacks, hysteria. But locals knew Jason was still alive. In 2015, a chilling video surfaced on the deep web: the Revenant Protocol. It showed a military debriefing. Men in suits reviewed photos of campgrounds. One voice said, "Subject 13 remains active. Termination attempts unsuccessful. Containment advised." Another voice replied, "Let the legend do its job." Fear keeps them away. The clip vanished in hours, but the legend only grew stronger. Jason Voorhees wasn't just a campfire story. He was a weapon no one could control. If you're still watching, this is the moment to like the video, because the deeper we go, the darker this becomes. And if you dare, subscribe, because Jason's shadow doesn't stop at the water's edge. Sightings multiplied across the Pacific Northwest. Campers disappeared. Families were found torn apart inside tents, but no predator left tracks. Park rangers whispered about finding crude masks nailed to trees, dripping with lake mud. Every case was silenced with the same line: unconfirmed animal activity. But animals don't leave symbols carved into bark. Animals don't whisper names. Krebs warned Lisa that Jason had become more than flesh. Trauma had shaped him into something that shouldn't exist. A revenant bound to fear, activated by memory. Each retelling of his story, each terrified whisper of his name gave him strength. People weren't just afraid of Jason. They were feeding him, and yet, some dared to seek him out. Thrill seekers, filmmakers, even occult groups. One group of urban explorers live-streamed their trip into the woods near West Lake. They laughed at the legend, mocked the mask. Hours later, the stream went black. Their equipment was found days later at the water's edge, smeared with blood. Their bodies were never recovered. A chilling pattern emerged. Jason never traveled far from water. Every disappearance linked to lakes, rivers, or marshlands. Witnesses swore they saw ripples in still ponds, as though something huge moved beneath. Some heard muffled cries under the water, like voices trapped below. It wasn't just murder. It was ritual. Doyle's last notes, recovered years later, revealed something more sinister. He wrote of files describing Jason as an echo of unresolved death. A weapon that doesn't need orders. It only needs trespassers. The government couldn't kill him because he wasn't alive in the way we understand. He was sustained by pain, fueled by memory, preserved by fear. Locals in Oregon began leaving offerings at the water's edge: flowers, food, small wooden masks. They said it kept him calm. Some believed ignoring him would only provoke him. For them, Jason wasn't a story. He was a presence, a silent god of the lake, worshipped out of necessity, not faith. One survivor's testimony was buried in police records, but a leaked copy made its way online. He was a camper who vanished for 3 days, then returned, drenched and mute. When he finally spoke, his words were chilling. He waits under the water. He doesn't blink. He doesn't breathe. He just waits. Authorities dismissed it as trauma. But the boy's drawings told another story. Pages filled with masks, knives, trees dripping with blood, and always the lake at the center. Some believe Jason is bound to his mother's last wish, that Pamela's obsession keeps him tethered, an eternal son carrying out eternal revenge. Others believe the experiments of Revenant Protocol corrupted him beyond humanity, making him something that can't die because it never truly lived. But here's the truth that chills the blood. Every attempt to erase Jason, to silence the files, to burn the evidence, has only made his legend grow stronger. Fear is not just his weapon, it's his oxygen. And the question that remains isn't if Jason Voorhees exists. It's how many people will vanish before the world admits he was never fiction. So remember this. When you hear ripples in still water, when the forest falls too silent, when you see a crude mask nailed to a tree, you might not be alone. Jason doesn't need to be summoned. He doesn't need to be called. He waits, and one day, when the story spreads too far, he won't be waiting anymore. Subscribe if you want more terrifying truths like this. Leave a like if you dared to listen until the end. And comment below, do you think Jason Voorhees was ever just a story? Or is he still out there waiting by the water?